What's up guys, Naughty and Sans here, back yet again with another very exciting episode. It's kind of exciting, it's a little more technical than exciting, but it's still learn how to edit stuff. I get messages every single day about Premiere being laggy, Premiere being slow, what can I do to make Premiere faster, what can I do to optimize my system, and today we're gonna cover all of it. Now I'm not saying I have all the answers, but I can give you my best practices, tips, tricks, advice, all of that stuff about your computer, what you should be doing with your system, how you can optimize Premiere to work better for you, even if you're on a laptop versus a PC, all of that fun stuff. I'm gonna try to cover everything today, so by the end of this video, you hopefully feel a little bit better about working. Because there is literally nothing more frustrating than not being able to work or sitting down to edit, and you have an idea that you wanna get out in your head and not being able to do it because of computer problems, so hopefully we're gonna fix some of that stuff. Now before we open Premiere, or any programs at all for that matter, I want you to hit the Windows key, and I want you to type in update, and then I want you to see if you have any Windows updates available for your computer, because if you do, you're gonna wanna do that first. Anything that you can do with your computer system first is gonna be beneficial to you. So maybe you're having problems in Premiere and things are moving slow and you don't know why. It may be because your computer is not up to date. So in addition to updating Windows, you're also gonna wanna update your graphics card drivers. If you're using an NVIDIA graphics card, which a lot of you may be using, you're gonna wanna download the GeForce Experience app and click on the drivers section and make sure that your graphics card drivers are up to date. On top of graphics cards, you're also gonna wanna make sure that like your BIOS is up to date, your motherboard settings are all correct, and it's different for every computer. I have an MSI motherboard in my computer, so there's this thing called MSI Live Update. It basically goes through and tells me all the drivers and all the things that I am missing that I can currently install. I've also updated my BIOS to the most recent version, and every computer is different, every motherboard is different, so depending on the brand or whatever of your computer, you're gonna wanna look into the tools that they have to make that happen. I don't know what kind of rig you're using, so just do a quick Google search of your computer make and model and make sure every single thing that you can possibly update is up to date. And now we're gonna open Premiere. All right guys, Adobe Premiere is open, and what we're gonna do is come up to Edit and come down to Preferences, and we're gonna start with General. Now, yours should look mildly similar to mine here. The only thing that may be different on mine is Bins, double click, open in new window. And the reason why I like this is because if I double click on any one of these bins down here, it will open that in a new window instead of opening it in a new tab down here, which can get really annoying and really clustered real quick. So double click, open a new window. It's just really nice, especially if you're using a second monitor. You can just take this window and just move it over to your second monitor. You can't see my second monitor, but it is there. So this is kind of nice. The rest of everything should be pretty self-explanatory, and I just keep it default other than double click, open in new window. Now, coming down to appearance, this is where you can adjust the appearance of Premiere. Some people like to use it lighter. I think this looks awful and absolutely terrible, so I would never use it like that. So I'm gonna come down here to darker, and then it makes my highlight color a little bit more of a highlight versus the lighter, which like kind of just, I don't know, don't use that. And then these two things I keep at default as well. Moving down to audio now, I'm pretty sure that all of this is the default Adobe Premiere, what they give you. A couple important things to take a look at. Mute input during timeline recording. If you're gonna be recording voiceovers or anything directly onto your timeline, I would definitely keep this on, but I keep it off because I never do that. And then the only other thing I would say is this one down here, render edit in Audition files to, and I'm gonna keep it next to the original media file. So if I have a voiceover file or anything like that, I decide to render it in Audition, it's gonna save that file that I render next to the original when possible. Just makes it way easier to find. Now, audio hardware. Depending on your computer specs and depending on how you have your speakers set up and all of that stuff, you'll change your default input and output to whatever your desired input and output is. And my recommendation for latency is to keep it as low as possible. The higher your latency, the more audio lag you're gonna have. So maybe yours is set at like 200 or 250 or higher, and you may be experiencing some weird audio lag during playback or when you're trying to edit. The latency is probably the answer, so I keep mine at 50. You can keep yours at kind of whatever you want. Sample rate, setting it to 4800 Hertz. That is the recommended audio Hertz sample rate for Premiere. I wouldn't really touch that. Next, autosave. If you guys don't have autosave turned on, you are just turn autosave on, please, for the love of God. I can't tell you how many times something has crashed or something is like shut down or whatever, and I lost a tremendous amount of work because I didn't have autosave on. So click on the automatically save projects dialog. I am saving every 6 minutes for a maximum of 200 project versions. That's a lot of versions. They don't take up a tremendous amount of space, but you don't want to be stuck in a situation where you lose all of your work and then you're unable to open an autosave. Because I've had a crash and then I just open up the autosave and I've only lost like 2 minutes of work as opposed to like 2.5 hours of work where I actually saved my project last. So the project autosave is like a huge thing that you absolutely 100% should be using. Capture, not really much going on here. Defaults are fine. I think this is defaults. Collaboration, unless you're using team projects, this tab is not going to do anything for you. I personally don't like to use team projects. I've tried to in the past. It's very clunky, doesn't really make a lot of sense, so I don't even touch this tab. Control surface, nothing going on here for my computer, probably yours as well. Device control, again, defaults are fine for Premiere because nothing's really going on here. Graphics, European and East Asian, text engine, yes, because I'm not in a South Asian or Middle Eastern country, so European and East Asian is totally fine. Labels, you can kind of tailor make these labels to whatever you want. So like if you have interviews, you can set, instead of it saying purple, you can say interviews. And you know, instead of tan, you can say like B-roll. And then when you label your clips in Adobe Premiere, you can label it as these things instead of just colors. So this is kind of tailor-made to whatever you guys are working on. Sometimes I'll leave them default. Sometimes I'll set them depending on the project I'm working on. And then you have your label defaults right here that you can also set so you can bring things in a certain color every single time. As you can see, a new bin is automatically mango, and down here it is reflective of the defaults. So just some color coordination, making it look nice, you know, do whatever you want. Media. This tab is absolutely important, 100%. So starting off at the top, intermediate timecode base. I always have my timecode base at 23976. I'm usually shooting in 23976, so this never changes. The timecode is going to use the media source. Frame count start at 0 and default media scaling. Now this is an interesting one. If you're working in a 4K timeline and you bring in a video that's 1080, right now, as you know, if you drop that 1080 video onto your timeline, it'll be small in the frame. Or vice versa, if you're working in 1080 and you have a 4K clip, it'll be gigantic and it'll be like outside the frame lines. But by switching default media scaling from none to set to frame size, it will automatically set the source video to the size of your timeline automatically, and it will automatically reflect those changes in the effect controls panel. So if I have a 4K clip and I drop it on a 1080 timeline, that clip will read at 50% scale because it has to scale it that much in order to fit it in 1080, and it will do it automatically. So you're not gonna miss anything. Nothing's gonna be blown up or shrunken down too small. This is a great little tool to kind of like optimize your workflow, not necessarily your system, but definitely your workflow. But the most important part of this media tab to me is automatically refresh growing files. Turn that garbage off. A few weeks ago, my computer was just bogged down and I didn't know why. I had just updated Premiere and things were just moving really slow. And I searched through all the menus and I found this stupid automatically refresh growing files thing, and I turned it off and magically my computer started working again. And I don't really know what it is. I looked online. It's basically, you can edit files that are still being recorded because Premiere is constantly refreshing every 60 seconds to see if any media has changed. That means for you, if you don't have media that's constantly changing, that Premiere is still updating every 60 seconds, and it's just gonna cause problems and it's gonna cause slowdowns and bog downs. So if this is turned on for you, turn it off right now. Absolutely, just what? Why Adobe? Media cache, also an important tab. So for me, I have a separate SSD in my computer that is just for storing my cache files. Now, maybe some of you don't have an extra hard drive or whatever, but basically your cache files, you're gonna wanna store on the fastest drive in your computer or your fastest external hard drive. So 7200 RPM external hard drive, save your cache files there. Don't save it to like a 5400 RPM drive. Don't save them to your operations disk, like your C disk. Don't save them there either. It just causes a lot of problems. So if you can, absolutely have a dedicated drive to put your cache files on and anything like that, like I do. Also, every once in a while, you're just gonna wanna delete your unused cache. From older projects that you aren't working on anymore that are just taking up computer space, just delete the unused cache. And coming down here, I'm gonna set mine to automatically delete cache files after 90 days. So in that way, after 3 months, Premiere will be like, hey, you're not using these anymore, automatically delete them, but it's still good to delete your unused cache files every so often if you're encountering slow problems. Memory, another important tab. RAM reserved for other applications. You're gonna wanna drop that number down to as low as you possibly can. So I'm only reserving 3 gigs of RAM for everything else. So the most amount of RAM I can allocate to Adobe software is what I'm gonna do. So keep this number as low as you possibly can, especially if you're not doing anything else except for editing, and you're gonna wanna optimize your rendering for performance and not for memory. Playback. Pre-roll and post-roll, that's totally fine. The one thing you're gonna wanna turn off in this menu is enable Mercury Transmit. And what that's doing is it's looking to your computer for an external source monitor that's not your normal computer monitor, right? Like I have my computer monitor sitting right here, it's my normal monitor. What this is saying to do is to export your main timeline view window to another like TV or something. So if I had a TV here, I could set my computer to constantly have my timeline playing on that TV, which is great. Does take a little bit more power, but if you don't have that, turn this off, absolutely. So enable Mercury Transmit, we're just gonna turn that off. Sync settings, I don't really mess with that too much. Timeline is kind of an important one. So my video transition default duration is 30 frames, which is like roughly a little bit more than a second if you're using 23976 or 24 FPS. Audio transition default duration is 2 frames. So then when I right click in between 2 audio clips, it'll create a very, very short transition in there that's only 2 frames long to help blend the audio just a little bit nicer. Still image default duration 12 frames. If you're trying to do like a time lapse or anything like that, you can keep this also at 2 frames, which will bring in any still image at 2 frames. Maybe you have this set really high and you drag in an image and it's like super long on your timeline. This is how you get that to be a little bit shorter. Timeline mouse scrolling, vertical. I have mine set to vertical. Horizontal, when you use the scroll wheel on your mouse here, it'll scroll this way, where for me, I like it to scroll vertically because I like to stack a lot of audio layers. So vertical makes a little bit more sense for me, but you can turn it to horizontal if you'd like. And now down here, my God, we're gonna mess with these a little bit. Snap playhead and timeline when snap is enabled. Absolutely. What that will do is it will snap your playhead to the end of a clip so you can quickly find things and it just snaps and it's a little bit easier instead of like constantly searching frame by frame to find it. Just turn that on. At playback end, return to beginning when restarting playback. Turn that off. Have you ever been watching anything and it gets to the end of your timeline and then starts over again from the beginning for no reason when you want to like make edits to the end? Turn that off. Display out of sync indicators, don't really care about that. Play work area after rendering previews, I keep that off as well because once you render your timeline, it just automatically starts playing. Like sometimes I'll just render and then go do something in the background and all of a sudden audio will come out of nowhere and I don't really want that. So I like to keep that off. Personal preference, if you want to keep that on or off, it doesn't matter. Render audio when rendering video. Yes, please. Show clip mismatch warning dialog. Yeah, occasionally I'll like to see what's going on in Premiere with that. And that's about it for the timeline panel. And now we're going to trim, and I think that's okay. So the most important things that you guys are gonna wanna pay attention to are your media tab, automatically refresh growing files, turn that garbage off, your media cache, making sure to delete your unused cache files, memory, allocating as much RAM as humanly possible to your Adobe applications, and your playback, disable Mercury Transmit, and your timeline, turning a couple of these things on, snapping playhead, and off at playback end, return by starting playback, yada yada. And then click OK. And now, to the best of my knowledge and my abilities, we have optimized Adobe Premiere in the menu system to give you guys a little less problems. Now let's drop in some footage and see what we can do to kind of minimize the amount of lag that you guys are experiencing. All right, first things first, if you guys import a batch of footage and it's all shot at the same frames per second and by the same camera and all this other stuff, don't start a new sequence down here just out of nowhere. The easiest thing you could possibly do is take one of your clips and just drag it down to the new item button, and it will automatically create a new sequence based on the source resolution and FPS of the video that you're editing. This is tremendously helpful because if you're editing on a timeline that doesn't match your clips, you may get weird lag and you may get stutters and you may get all this stuff that you're not sure about. So just simply dragging and dropping it onto the new item button and creating a timeline based on the source resolution is the best thing you can possibly do. Now, I'm probably not going to get very many playback issues, but say you're experiencing some playback issues in your timeline. The one thing that you absolutely can do to make sure that you can play your stuff back is just simply rendering it. So if I set an in point at the beginning and an out point at the end, I can come up here to sequence, render into out, and it will render that bit of video so I'm able to play it back in full quality without any frame lag or stutter or anything like that. Conversely, if you want to just play through your timeline without rendering it, turn this from full to anything other than full. So you can go to half resolution, you can go to 1/4 resolution, and it will downgrade or downsample the resolution in your playback so you can kind of watch it through not at full quality, and that will help you a little bit as well. And as always, don't forget to save. So basically, the biggest part of optimizing your system is actually making sure the system itself is optimized. So updating Windows, updating your graphics card drivers, updating all of your motherboard and everything else, all of the drivers and necessary updates that you need for your computer to run without any Adobe programs at all. You're gonna wanna make sure that you prioritize those things on a weekly, bi-weekly, or at the very, very least monthly basis. Just constantly make sure that you're updating your system. The second thing you're gonna do is you're gonna follow what I have set in my Adobe Premiere menu settings. You're gonna turn some stuff off, you're gonna turn some stuff on, you're gonna allocate as much RAM as you possibly can to Adobe applications, and that should help tremendously. Regardless if you have 32, 64, 8 gigs of RAM, it's gonna help you. And last but not least, when you're actually working inside of Premiere, make sure that you downgrade the resolution of your output to 1/2 or 1/4 if you're experiencing weird playback issues, or if you wanna play back in full, just simply set an in and out point and render that section of video so you can play it back in full without any issues at all. Guys, if you are experiencing issues with playback or lag on your computer before watching this video and have since corrected those issues after watching this video, I would love to know your thoughts and your opinions on what I have shared with you today. Drop a comment in the comment section below. That's it for this lesson, guys. I hope you are out there optimizing your system to the best it can possibly be. If you haven't yet, make sure you subscribe to the channel and also check out the last video that you missed. We do them here weekly at Learn How to Edit Stuff. We didn't teach you how to edit anything today, but at least you can probably go and edit now that your computer's updated and that Premiere is optimized. God, I'm proud of you guys. Subscribe, check out the last video, and I'll see you next time.